Happy New Year, Ryan.
Same to you, Rudy. Happy New Year, everyone.
And I don't want to say Happy New Year. This is Monday's one,
Yeah.
and we've had two last week.
Oh, well,
Happy New Year
first
from
time
you.
for me, so Happy New Year from me.
Yeah. So, any changing thoughts on Bitcoin?
Look, not really. Like over Christmas period, it wasn't like a Christmas frenzy. Sometimes in the crypto world, things go a bit nuts over Christmas. Instead, we saw a little bit of the heat come out of it. The price pulled back a little. Like when I say pulled back a little, it wasn't that much, but it was a little pullback, a little bit of profit taking coming to the end of the year. And then as soon as we ticked over past the 1st of January, the buyers started coming in again. And as we speak, I'm just looking at the charts, we're back at about 102,000 US dollars. We can go over some of this today if you want, but the noises coming out of the incoming Trump administration are as positive as ever. One guy, Howard Lutnick, who we've talked about before, who's to be the incoming commerce secretary, he came out over Christmas and said every time Bitcoin falls, I'll be buying the dip. So this is a senior administrator coming into the Trump administration saying he's going to buy Bitcoin on the dip, and he already has a lot of Bitcoin himself. So yeah, the things are looking really bullish. I know we've talked about this before, but 20th of January is the day when Trump officially takes charge, his inauguration day. He will do a speech. Will he mention anything to do with crypto or Bitcoin? If he does, that could be super interesting. But behind the scenes, it looks obvious to me that it's going to be a very pro-Bitcoin and pro-crypto presidency.
I was going to ask you that. So I was having a chat with an old colleague from the States just this morning, actually. We had a really good conversation. Now, he's big into gold, right? And we just got chatting about the differences and the similarities between gold and Bitcoin. But he's a natural conservative. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean politically. He's more on the libertarian side. But I mean, with his money, he's not a speculator. Mm-hmm. And he just said, I just don't trust it. I just don't trust it. Now, for whether that's for bad, and he said, I suspect we're in a post-Trump proper boom phase, which is going to dissipate. And when we had lots about institutional buying, what happens when institutional selling takes place. So I just thought that I'd put that to you, Ryan, because obviously this goes out to the wide world.
Yeah.
Not many people, or maybe they're finding this interview, this chat about it, and they don't quite know your views on it. But that is a what should I say? Widely believed or suspected viewpoint, isn't it? What do you say to that? And is it a real threat or a risk?
Look, so I've been in Bitcoin for 10 years. Bitcoin itself has been around for like 15 years, 16 years now. I've been around it for 10, and every statement like that has been made. Every argument you'll ever hear against Bitcoin I've heard it probably 10, 9 years ago, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, 6 years ago. I've heard them all the time. And when you're first into it, you give it a bit more thought and you maybe consider it more. But if your friend is a libertarian or an advocate of free markets, which most libertarians are, you respect the opinion of the market sometimes more than your own as well. You realize you don't know everything and you respect the opinion of the market. And if you look at the Bitcoin price over the last 10, 15 years, 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, it's gone up heap. So you can have worries, you can have concerns, you cannot trust it, but the market is telling you're wrong over any time frame. And to the point about not trusting it, the beauty of Bitcoin is you don't need to trust it. You don't need to trust anyone. You're owning part of a decentralized protocol which no one can control. And it doesn't matter how much Bitcoin you have. BlackRock could have a heap of Bitcoin. MicroStrategy could have a heap of Bitcoin. A nation state could buy some Bitcoin. They can't change the protocol without the participation of the global network of users around the world. And the good thing about being in Bitcoin so long is we've gone through tests like that. So in theory, you couldn't do it. But in 2017, there was a thing called the block size wars where some people tried to change Bitcoin and they tried to persuade everyone to change the underlying protocol, and it didn't work. And there's been a million copycats that have never worked. So 10, 15 years out of being stress tested against the world, against everyone hating it, against governments trying to ban it, stop it, big finance trying to tell everyone not to buy it, everyone thinking you're stupid for buying it. People have told me I'm an idiot in the past. And yet the price of Bitcoin has gone from when I first bought $600 all the way to $102,000 today. So at some point, you've got to recognize your worries might be misplaced. Now, if your friend's an advocate of gold, there's plenty. Gold was original hard money. It was meant to be a check and balance to government spending too much money they didn't have through debt, which is what the fiat system allows them to do. And originally, gold was the check and balance on that. If you created too much money, you'd have to get rid of some of your gold holdings, and that would keep you in check. As we know, in 1971, President Nixon got the United States off the gold standard completely. And initially, that was actually good for gold. If you think of the 70s, gold went on a massive run after that because people were like, hang on, if money has no tether to reality, there's going to be rampant inflation. And I think there was in the 70s. And people bought bought gold back then as a hedge. And that's exactly how it worked. But over time, I think where gold has failed to perform its function, I don't want to bag gold necessarily, but I'm just saying it's important to realize realize the distinction between Bitcoin is it's not very easy to custody gold. And so what's that resulted in has resulted in a massive paper market for gold. And no one knows who holds the gold, where it is, how much anyone has. It's in vaults. It's all around the world. No one really knows where it is, who has it. And there's a massive paper market on top of that where people buy and sell gold they don't have. And because of that massive paper market, the price discovery function of gold has got somewhat diminished, and it hasn't been able to hold governments to account. And that's why we're seeing massive government debts these days. And the gold market has reacted a bit, but not anywhere near where it should have over the last 10 years. Where Bitcoin is different is it's a public ledger. You can't hide Bitcoin. We know where we can see the addresses where it's at. We can you can custody it. I can hold my own Bitcoin in like the blink of an eye. I can transfer part of it to you right now over this conversation, and you'll get it within a few minutes for almost zero cost.
Please send it over.
Well, send me your address, send me a QR code, and I'll send you one Satoshi, which is the smallest unit of Bitcoin. But you can do all that with Bitcoin, and so it's sort of like it has the hard money functions of gold. It's got limited supply. It's not easy to recreate. It's fixed, and it has a cost for creating it, like a mining cost, we call it. So it's got the features of hard money that gold has, but it's also got extra features, portability. You can take Bitcoin with you anywhere in the world, by storing, a phrase in your head. You can send part of it, a tiny part of it, over the internet at the speed of light. You can custody it yourself. You're not relying on the financial system to hold it for you like you do with gold. A lot of people own gold ETFs or gold paper. So that's a crucial difference. So if your friend is a gold aficionado of gold, the thing they have to get over of not trusting Bitcoin is just to try and understand it more, to find out how it works and how the history of it has reacted. And then maybe put that in the context of the fact the market is telling them through price action that they're wrong so far. And in my opinion, they'll continue to be wrong. And what we've got coming up in 2025, we've got not just people like me saying Bitcoin's a good thing, but you've got countries now saying it. You've got several countries now actively either starting up behind the scenes without telling anyone or publicly declaring they're going to do it, set up Bitcoin reserves. So countries that are saying, hang on, we need to own some Bitcoin. Because what happens if Trump does move the US to hold a lot of Bitcoin and we don't have it? We'll be stuck on an old financial system of paper money, which is worthless. And the world will have moved on to a new digital currency system with Bitcoin at its heart. And so you're starting to get countries considering that and actually implementing things like that. From Chile to the Czechoslovakia to Switzerland has got a vote right now about that. Like I said at the start, Trump looks like he's going to do something big on that. Canada looks set to get a new prime minister. And the guy that's coming in there, Pierre Bolivar, is a conservative who was talking about Bitcoin 4 years ago and stood up in Parliament saying we should own some Bitcoin. So what I'm trying to say in the context of all that what I was saying there is, Bitcoin is not a new thing now. You can be fearful of something you don't understand. You can ignore the market, and you can ignore what I think is coming. You're likely to be on the wrong side of a future monetary divide.
That's a very good summary. Ryan, look, you do actually cover some of these points in today's Fat Tail Daily. It's an interesting parallel actually between a guy called Timothy Dexter's continental dollar trade and the current institutional adoption of Bitcoin. So maybe just could you expand on that and why you think this particular historical comparison might be relevant for investors today? You might want to start with just a bit of background on it. So it's a cool story.
Yeah, it's a good story. I sort of encourage anyone to read the actual article because they'll probably put more detail. But
Link
Timothy
below.
Dexter, yeah, the link's below. Yeah, Timothy Dexter was this investor that I'd never heard of, and I heard about him over the holidays just reading stuff, and I was like, "Oh, who's this guy?" And he's famously known as the stupidest successful investor that's ever existed. He was around in the fledgling United States in the late 1700s. He was born poor, was an indentured servant until the age of 16 on a farm. So he was the working poor in America from Irish immigrants, and kind of guy that would have been destined for a life of poverty. But he got a stroke of luck when he was in his 20s. He met a wealthy widow, and he married her. And suddenly he was in living in a Charleston mansion, and he had some money. But he was in this sort of high society of Boston by this time. But the elite looked down at him, said he had uncouth manners, couldn't speak properly, didn't have any learning. So people, I think I even read it, I didn't put this in the article, but they gave him a job. So they thought, we'll have to give him some sort of job. So they gave him a job, a government job called the Informer of the Deer. And his job was to go out to look out for the number of deer in the woods around Boston and count them. And apparently there hadn't been a deer spotted for like 20 years. So it was just here's a job, mate, like go away and leave us alone.
Yeah.
Anyway, he wasn't deterred by this. He tried to learn as much as he could from these rich people. He'd overcome harsher difficulties in his life. And he, at the time, the US had just won its independence war against Britain. And they had a new currency called the Continental Dollar. But the Brits, they were sore losers at the time, so they were flooding the American market with counterfeit dollars. And so the value of the continental dollar was plummeting. You're talking about, 2.5% of its original value. And everyone was trying to get rid of their paper money because it wasn't the people didn't know, what was real, what wasn't, and they were all just trying to sell it. And the people were losing fortunes over that. And so most people were selling, but Timothy Dexter, for some reason, decided to buy it, and he pretty much put everything him and his wife had in buying these continental dollars up from everyone who wanted to sell. And at one point, he owned 20% of the supply of continental dollars ever printed. Now, this looked like a crazy move. This is maybe like buying Zimbabwean dollars when they're toilet paper. And I don't know if he had some insight or not, but he did it. And in 1889, the US's first Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, which people might know from the musical Hamilton, he came in charge, and apparently he himself had bought a lot of these continental dollars. So there's a little insight. And so what he did as one of his first acts was to say, hey, you can exchange these continental dollars for the debt of the US government, so Treasury notes, at a certain fixed price. And the fact when he did that, anyone who owned these continental dollars, overnight they made a fortune as soon as he said that. So overnight, Timothy Dexter, because of this currency revaluation, made an absolute fortune on his continental dollars. So that was the trade he made. He made a bunch of other weird trades, which you should read in the article, which are a bit crazy, but came off for him. And he became a bit of an eccentric millionaire. But that currency trade was interesting to me because right now, the fiat world is going through a lot of flux. You're seeing a lot of stuff happening in the currency world. We're getting inflation for one. Even in Australia, we're getting inflation. I know you're talking to our colleague Murray Dawes recently, and we're talking about the Australian dollar going down in value as well. It's gone down 10% or 11% since September. That's quite a big fall in terms of what it can buy.
100%.
You've got the BRICS nations like Russia, China, India talking about creating their own new currency. At the same time, you've got the US's debt load at like 35, 36 trillion and counting, which means the reserve currency issuer is printing more and more dollars every year and pretty much has no chance of being ever be able to pay that back. So when I look at that, we're undergoing some sort of weird currency crisis. There's a similar situation of flux happening. And what will happen when that gets too bad is someone will act. And my thesis or my underlying thought is that that's what the Trump administration is going to do. They're going to try to deal with the currency crisis as they see it head on. And I'm not saying they're going to get rid of the US dollar or anything, but they're going to try and hedge their bets, and they're going to try and do that by setting up a Bitcoin strategic reserve in the US. That way they can own an asset which potentially appreciates over time a lot. At the same time, they can try and control the value of their US dollar and keep that low, which helps their exports and other things like that. So they're going to try and sort of separate the medium of exchange and power function they have by having the US dollar
with the store of value
function.
Yeah.
And I think that's super interesting if they go ahead with that. And they're not being shy about saying it. So this is not like me just theoretically projecting some idea onto them. That's what they're pretty much saying they're going to do. And if they do that, that is a massive moment. That's akin to a Hamilton moment in my head anyway. I don't know if people realize it because, like you said at the start, there's people that just don't trust it. but you don't even need to trust it or even know about it these days. You can just follow what the people are actually telling you they're about to do. So if Trump follows through with that, I think we will see Bitcoin and the broader crypto market go on a massive run in 2025. But you can't wait for it to happen. You know, Bitcoin, just looking at my chart now, Bitcoin was, almost $60,000 back in November. Now it's at $102,000.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You wait on Bitcoin. You don't, because there's a learning curve as well. I don't want people to ever buy into something mindlessly. The reason I'm telling them about this bigger picture and the fact that these things are going to happen is to maybe get them to think, maybe I've not understood this asset properly. Because if these people are going to do that, there must be something I'm missing in my framework. And so the first point of call with any asset is to understand what it is. And I've tried to explain some of the differences today. But there is a time limit on this because once they start to act, the price in crypto can move very rapidly indeed. And you don't want to be buying into the top of a rush because there is volatility and pullbacks along the way too. So the time to think about this stuff is now, and have some sort of position as part of your overall portfolio. I'm not saying to be like Timothy Dexter and go all in on some crazy trade, but having 5% of your portfolio dedicated to something that the American government is potentially going to do isn't necessarily a crazy thing either.
You highlight how Dexter succeeded by seeing opportunity where others only saw chaos. I was going to ask you, where do you think the chaos is now? Is it in Bitcoin or is it in fiat currencies and the Aussie, US dollar mainly, I guess, but all the others feed off from that.
Yeah. The chaos is there for all to see. We can see, like we sort of know this. Like even if you don't follow financial markets like we do, you as closely as we do, you know that there's chaos. Let's look at some of the, without going to the symptom. Let's look at the obvious examples. House prices are really hard for anyone under 40 to get in Australia. They've got why have house prices gone nuts? Why are they not coming down? There's issues there. Why is the price of electricity going up? Why is the price of your groceries going up? Why is the Aussie dollar plummeting right now? These are all things that are happening in our everyday life. People know that, you know what I mean? So that's not weird. They're like little clues that something is not right in the economy. And my argument or my thesis always is it stems from money. The problems always stem from money, how it is created, who gets to create it, who gets to benefit from it. Because there's winners and losers with money. And the important thing you've got to realize is that for a long time, when gold was money, the power to create money wasn't in anyone's hand. It was a semi-neutral thing. There was effects on how close you were to the money supply would matter as well. But with the fiat money system we live in now, there are people that control money, the Fed, the reserve banks, and they do get to decide who benefits from it most and at what times, So that's the system we live in. But I think that worked for a while, or it seemed to work for a while. But we're reaching the point now where there's a lot of people losing from it. And when there's a lot of people losing from it, then people start examining things closely and start looking for alternatives. And so I think that's what's happening right now. That's the chaos, I think, right now. And the battle right now is between certain people who want to maintain the system, but maybe shift it slightly. And you're seeing that in the politics. The politics goes more extreme, doesn't it? It goes more extreme left, more extreme right, because people want to change. They know something has to change, but they don't know quite what to do. Do they do it? Do they go to the left or the right? Look in the world right now. You've got Justin Trudeau resigning. You've got Macron got voted out. You've potentially got a right-wing party in Germany coming to power. You've got Javier Milei, a libertarian in Argentina, winning that election, and he's got his economic growth going on the back of government cuts. So you've got all the chaos is political, it's monetary, it's debt-based, it's societal-based. But it all stems from money, in my opinion. And so you fix money, it's not the be all and end all, but you start to fix these things. You start to take away the excesses of fiat corruption, as I would call it, and give power back more to people to try and earn money, trying to be able to save in something that can't be debased, try to have enough so they can buy a house and feed their family and stuff like that. That's how the world worked 50 years ago. People could live off a single income stream, bring up 5 kids, buy a new house and a car, and everyone got an education. Right now, I think I read the other day, you need a minimum $300,000 a year salary to do that in Sydney. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
right.
that's not sustainable, and I think that's where the chaos is coming from.
You also touch on, and this is linked to the point you just made, that you touch on the rapid institutional adoption of Bitcoin, particularly by players like BlackRock and MicroStrategy. How do you see that continuing in 2025? I just noticed just this last week, MicroStrategy bought another load of Bitcoin. I'm sure that popped up on my feed. How much can these institutions actually buy before it becomes they become like, I know there's maybe another, in this something you may have already heard before as well, like back in the 80s when the Hunt brothers cornered the silver market. Are they not cornering the Bitcoin market?
So
that's not a devil's advocate question. I'm just asking
No.
at what point.
It's not a similar thing. And again, the Hunt brothers analogy comes out quite a bit where they tried to corner the market of silver. But you've got to remember what the Hunt brothers were doing was buying paper gold certificates,
Yes.
not physical commodity. And so what happened to them was that the regulator changed the margin requirements. And so overnight, they had to pay back all this money, and they didn't have silver, so they had to find money from somewhere. It's a different scenario, and I've heard it brought up by people that are skeptical of Bitcoin, but it's not the same thing. So BlackRock have, in 2024, launched the first Bitcoin spot ETF, and it's the most successful one-year inflows ETF ever. I think they got about $35 billion worth of inflows in the first year, the third most popular ETF in America after like 2 huge, S&P 500 indices, which, all the lazy pension money goes into. So the fact that the BlackRock one was the third, it was a massive buying spree from BlackRock. But you've got to remember, it's not from BlackRock. It's by millions of investors who use BlackRock as their ETF. Yeah. So that's not one institution buying it. That's an institution buying on behalf of millions of investors. So that's the first point. The second point is, despite the immense range of buying, which brought the price of Bitcoin from 30K to 100K, BlackRock right now, in their ETF, only have about 0.5% of all the Bitcoin in existence. So it's a lot, but it's not a massive amount. Same with Michael Saylor of MicroStrategy, who's been buying Bitcoin for the last 4 years under his company structure in a variety of very creative ways. He still only has about 0.4% of all the Bitcoin in existence. I can't remember, but there was a comparison to the gold market, or maybe it was even the Hunt brothers. They had apparently they had 20 or 30% of the silver market when they cornered it. Massive amount. And that was paper certificates, not real gold, not real silver. And so right now, even despite this immense buying coming from the likes of BlackRock, Fidelity, and MicroStrategy, they own less than 1%. By far, the vast majority of Bitcoin is still in the hands of individual investors like me, that have been around for like 10 years. And so that will change over time. There will be more institutional adoption, and those figures will change. But right now, we went from 30K to 100K on the most successful ETF launch ever. If that institutional money, even if you look at the spot demand and supply metrics like I sometimes do, the buying from ETFs, it gets reported on, and even I follow it quite closely, but it only makes up a small percentage of the buying and selling that happens on a daily basis in Bitcoin. There's still the big whales, the rich people, the individual buyers, the dollar cost averagers.
Yeah.
That makes up a far larger part of the daily active sort of trading statistics still. So there is a point maybe where institutional investment becomes really important to the price discovery. But right now, it's not that big a deal. The bigger deal is the psychological effect of it. It's the fact that BlackRock for a long time said that Bitcoin was an index of fraud. Now suddenly they're telling their clients that it's a really important part of your portfolio. It's that psychological effect that's important. MicroStrategy, what Michael Saylor is doing with MicroStrategy is trying to show corporate America or corporations around the world, actually listed corporations, how you can preserve the cash in your balance sheet over time by investing in Bitcoin. And his company, by doing that, is the best performing stock over the last 12 months and over the last 4 years. done better than Nvidia, and you're getting a bunch of copycats now copying him. So again, to me, the interesting thing there is that Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy have introduced Bitcoin to a new market, to the corporate buyer of Bitcoin. As long as I've been in Bitcoin, it's always been about individual empowerment and individuals buying it. He's introduced a new buyer, corporate buyers, but he's also introduced another buyer in recent times, and that was maybe one of the announcements you saw over Christmas. He's creating sort of, I won't go into the details of it, but creating making creative ways for like institutions like insurance companies and bond investors to have exposure to Bitcoin, which normally they can't do because of the sort of the terms of their investing mandates. He's creating products which they are allowed to invest in, which gives them some exposure to Bitcoin or ways to make money from Bitcoin's volatility. And so he's introducing a whole new pool of trillions of dollars of capital into the Bitcoin market. So you put all those pieces together I've talked about today, a lot of different things, crisis in currency, inflation, cost of living crisis, social and political unrest. Then at the same time, corporations starting to buy Bitcoin, insurance companies starting to buy Bitcoin, countries looking at setting up strategic Bitcoin reserves, a changing of the guard in the US, a changing the guard of politics worldwide. Like to me, well, I've been here 10 years. I've never seen a more obvious point to buy Bitcoin. I had a mate, an Irish mate, actually, over the weekend, who told me, I think he'd had a few drinks. He was off on Ireland and he texted me and he's like, "Oh, I wish I'd listened to you like 10 years ago, Ryan, about Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah." I think he told me, I can't remember this, but he says, "You told me about it when it was $200 and I wish I'd listened to you about that." And then he's like, "I've just come in," anyway, he went on and goes, I've just come into 20K. What should I do with it?" I'm like, same as what I said 10 years ago, buy Bitcoin. He goes, "Oh, but have I not missed out on that?" I'm like, because like the old saying goes, the best time to buy Bitcoin was when I first told you about it. The next best time is today. I said, there's still got a heap of upside ahead. So I said, if you want something you can put money into and just forget about it and get going about your life for the next 3 or 4 years, that's probably what I would advise you to do. I can't think of a better idea anyway. So I said, but obviously risk disclaimers and all that apply. Could be wrong. But it's funny, people think that mindset that they've missed out on these unbelievable gains so far, but what they fail to realize is that Bitcoin is still, less than 1% of total global wealth. And most estimations, not from me, but from big financial companies, say it will become something like 5 or 10%. So, so that's the opportunity ahead. That's the risk reward. And I think the timing of 2025 is immense. And again, that comes back to the story I wrote today. When a change happens in currency markets, it happens fairly quickly. You know what I mean? When Richard Nixon takes the US off the gold standard, it happens in a heartbeat, and then things change, and then you have to be able to react. The implications of that move are with us today. The implications of that move by Richard Nixon 50 years ago resonate with us today and are partly responsible for the valuations we see in stock markets, property prices in Australia, and everything else. I think if Trump administration sets up a Bitcoin strategic reserve, the implications of that will flow on for the next 20, 30 years as well. So that's the immensity of it, as I see it. And you have to make your decisions before it becomes obvious.
Yeah, right. Well, we'll wrap it up there, Ryan. That was a really good whirlwind tour of what's been going on and a few other ideas in there too. But the key date to remember is just to see what happens on the 20th of January. If Trump does indeed mention a Bitcoin reserve, if they do, well, it looks like the fundamentals are in place regardless, but that could be a short-term catalyst, couldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Look, he might not say anything on that date like that. That's not a big deal. What seems clear to me is the people he's putting in charge are going to go ahead with that agenda. The fact of the date is that if he does mention it on that date, then things could get started really quickly. You know what I mean?
Well, let's see what happens. Take a read of Ryan's article below. It's really, really good one. And the links in the comment section, and tell us what you think on this chat. And more of the same, I think, in 2025. Thank you, Ryan. I'll speak to you soon when you get back.
No worries. Cheers.